Welcome back to A Considerate Life. As always, if you like the video, then give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share it with others. Today I want to string a few thoughts together and ultimately give an argument for the immateriality of mind. I know we did this video in the past, and in that video I just merely stipulated that mind was immaterial and wanted to talk about the nature of mind. In this video I want to start with another quotation from the novel Watership Down.
Yeah. Watership Down, check it out. Also dark.
Because I said that Adams has a interesting way of approaching certain philosophical issues. Last time we talked about the inverse relationship of beauty and utility. Today I want to talk about semiotics starting.
I need your opinion on a matter of semiotics.
I'm sorry?
Semiotics, the study of signs and symbols, is a branch of philosophy related to linguistics.
And then eventually get to the notion of intentionality and how intentionality argues for the immateriality of mind. But first let's start with Adams, and Adams says this. Now in Watership Down, there's a character named El-Ahri'Ra, and El-Ahri'Ra is kind of like their Adam. He was the progenitor of the entire species, and they look back to him and tell mythical stories about his tricks in order to explain how it is to be a rabbit, or tricks that you can play in order to survive as a rabbit. In this passage, Hazel and the other rabbits from the original warren are in another warren where the rabbits have all gotten a little bit strange. We come to find out, spoiler, that this is a warren on the edge of a farm. The farmer has been feeding the rabbits. They're bulky and sleek and well fed, but they've lost all of their rabbit-like instincts, and they've begun to take on human-like characteristics. So they sing over their young, they smile at each other, right? And so Adams is portraying this warren as taking on characteristics that are very un-rabbit-like and more human-like. And so as Hazel and his band of rabbits are visiting this new warren, this other rabbit, Strawberry, is explaining a bit of art to them. "Don't you know what those are?" said Strawberry. "They're bricks, the stones that men make their houses and barns out of. There used to be a well here long ago, but it's filled up now. The men don't use it anymore. That's the outer side of the well shaft. And this earth wall here is completely flat because of something, some man thing fixed behind it in the ground, but I'm not sure what." "There's something stuck on it," said Hazel. "Why, they're stones pushed into the surface. But what for?" "How do you like it?" asked Strawberry. Hazel puzzled over the stones. They were all the same size, pushed in at regular intervals into the soil. He could make nothing of them. "What are they for?" he asked again. "It's El-Ahri'Ra," said Strawberry. "A rabbit called Laburnum did it some time ago now. We have others, but this is the best. Worth a visit, don't you think?" Hazel was more at a loss than ever. He had never seen a laburnum and was puzzled at the name, which in Lapine meant poison tree. How could a rabbit be called Poison? And how could stones be El-Ahri'Ra? What exactly was it that Strawberry was saying was El-Ahri'Ra? In confusion, he said, "I don't understand." "It's what we call a shape," explained Strawberry. "Haven't you seen one before? The stones make the shape of El-Ahri'Ra on the wall, stealing the king's lettuce. You know that story." The reason I like this aspect of Adams' writing is he really does, at some level, understand that animals don't have a notion of what we'll end up calling intentionality. He's looking at these stones, and Hazel keeps asking Strawberry, what are they for? And whereas Hazel sees individual stones pushed into a wall, Strawberry sees a shape of a rabbit meant to stand for El-Ahri'Ra. This is what we were talking about when we used the term semiotics. Semiotics is that study of signs. What does it mean for a thing to stand as a symbol or a sign of something else? And in this particular passage, we have Strawberry pointing to this shape on the wall made out of stones, that's meant to represent the king rabbit, right? So he makes art. Now, when I was in grad school, I read Tolstoy's What is Art? And I thought it was a terrible, terrible aesthetic theory for reasons that I won't get into now. But one of the things that became clear to me is that, at least in my own mind, art, among other things, is a type of communication. It's a type of communication between the artist and the beholder, whoever that is, the receiver of that communication, right? So as such, every piece of art has some what we call intention behind it, intentionality. And in his book, The Last Superstition, Edward Feser talks about intentionality as a uniquely human and mental product. So he says this: but the human mind manifests final causality more obviously than anything else. It intends or plans actions and outcomes that do not yet exist and may never exist, but remain directed toward those actions and outcomes all the same. More generally, even where purposes and actions are not in question, the mind is characterized by what philosophers call intentionality, from the Latin intendere, to point at or to aim. It is directed toward or represents things beyond itself. For example, you can think about rocks and trees and dogs and cats and circles and squares and planets and galaxies. And in doing so, your mind is, as it were, directed toward them or pointing at beyond itself to them. So Feser's point is that these mental products have this feature of intentionality that is pointing beyond themselves to something else. Now, a common example in semiotics is something like a stop sign, right? Humans are so familiar with intentionality, we just take it for granted as an aspect of our language and our world. So a stop sign is itself something of itself. It is this metal, octagonal, red and white shape, right? Staked into the ground. But it intends something else. It intends a command. It intends a command for something you should do with your vehicle, namely stop it, right? So what Feser is pointing out here is that facet of intentionality is only something that minds and the product of minds have. Material objects don't have intentionality. Natural objects just are what they are. They don't intend unless we make them intend something, which is a product of a mind. And so that's one way in which, if we look at the notion of non-identity, that is, if A has a property or several properties that B does not have, then A and B cannot be identical, right? For example, water and H2O are identical. There are no properties that water has that H2O lacks, right? If it did, then water and H2O would not be identical, but they are. Similarly here, if we want to say that the mind just is the brain is this physical object, this physical organ inside your skull, and we want to make the mind and the brain identical, that means that the brain and the mind should have all the same properties, but they don't. The brain in and of itself doesn't have intentionality, right? But the mind does, right? And so while this line of argumentation is not in and of itself a argument for the existence of God, and we know that because there are philosophers like Thomas Nagel. I tend to rip off book jackets, but Thomas Nagel has this book, Mind and Cosmos. And in Mind and Cosmos, Nagel espouses a position that's called panpsychism. He says this on page 57. But since conscious organisms are not composed of a special kind of stuff, but can be constructed apparently from any of the matter in the universe suitably arranged, it follows that this monism, he calls it neutral monism earlier, will be universal. Everything living or not is constituted from elements having a nature that is both physical and non-physical, that is capable of combining into mental wholes. So Nagel's point is that every atom in the universe, every piece of matter, also carries with it some psychic element. And when these elements are combined together and suitably arranged in certain forms, then what happens, inevitably, what emerges is consciousness. That is at least another option for trying to describe this sort of uniquely mental phenomena. Now, obviously, I don't think those sorts of arguments succeed, and I think we have better other options. But it does point to the fact that these aspects of consciousness and rationality and intentionality, abstraction, things like that, they point to the mind's immateriality. And somebody like Nagel is not willing to simply bite the bullet and embrace a kind of materialism that really doesn't explain these phenomena. It actually denies these phenomena instead. So that was our chain of reasoning in this video, from Adam's notion of basically semiotics in Watership Down, from semiotics to communication, from communication in art to intentionality, from intentionality to the immateriality of mind. So if you want to look at the broader philosophy of mind and the nature of consciousness, you can look at this video. In my next video, I want to address a question that came up in my men's group a few weeks ago, and that is this. If in the Old Testament, the law and its sacrifices were sufficient to secure paradise for those who were righteous under the law, then why did Jesus have to come? We'll talk about that next time.